The crack of a pistol shot echoed through the dusty main street of Delta, Colorado. 1878, as Katherine Kate O'Donnell ducked behind a water trough, clutching a stolen ledger that would either save her life or end it. The warm May air carried the scent of gunpowder and fear as she watched the man who just tried to kill her, Frank Hollister, the most powerful and corrupt businessman in the county, storm into the saloon where she'd been hiding just moments before. Kate's heart hammered against her ribs as she glanced down at the leather-bound book in her trembling hands. Inside were meticulous records of Hollister's illegal dealings, extortion, and even 2 murders, evidence that could bring down his criminal empire and clear her father's name. But first, she had to survive long enough to get the ledger to the federal marshal in Montrose. At 22, Kate had never imagined her life would hang by such a precarious thread. Just 3 weeks ago, she'd been teaching at the local schoolhouse, quietly mourning her father who died in prison after Hollister framed him for embezzlement. Now she was Delta's most wanted fugitive. "Check behind the general store," Hollister's gravelly voice carried across the street. $500 to the man who brings me the O'Donnell girl alive. Kate flinched at the surge of voices and footsteps that followed. Delta was Hollister's town, and money talked. She needed to move, but daylight made her too visible. With the ledger tucked inside her blouse, she eased around the corner of the mercantile, planning to make her way to the livery stable where she might steal a horse. The back alleys of Delta were a maze of wooden crates, barrels, and rubbish. Kate navigated them with determined steps, keeping low. Her simple blue dress was caked with dirt and sweat, her once neat auburn hair falling loose from its pins. She'd been beautiful once before exhaustion, and fear had hollowed her cheeks and darkened the skin beneath her green eyes. As she neared the livery, a strong hand closed around her arm, yanking her into the shadows between 2 buildings. "Let me gee." Her scream was muffled by a calloused palm pressed against her mouth. "Quiet," a deep voice ordered in her ear, the words barely a whisper. "Unless you want Hollister's men to find you." Kate went still, her back pressed against a solid chest. When the hand slowly moved away from her mouth, she turned to face her captor and found herself looking into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that brushed his collar beneath a well-worn Stetson. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble. Not a local, she was certain she would have remembered him. "Who are you?" she whispered, tensing to run if necessary. "Owen O'Malley." His eyes scanned the alley over her head. "And you're the schoolteacher who stole from Frank Hollister." Kate stiffened. "I didn't steal anything that wasn't already stolen. That ledger proves my father was innocent." Owen's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "Hollister's offering a lot of money for you. Are you planning to collect it?" Kate challenged, though her voice wavered slightly. A grim smile tugged at his mouth. "If I was, would I be standing here talking to you?" Before she could respond, voices approached from the street. Owen pulled her deeper into the shadows, his body shielding hers from view. Kate held her breath as 2 of Hollister's men walked past the alley entrance, shotguns resting on their shoulders. "Marshals deputized half the men in town," one said. "Girl won't make it to sundown." When their footsteps faded, Owen released Kate and stepped back. "You need to get out of Delta. Hollister won't stop until he has that ledger back." "I know," Kate said. "I was heading to the livery to get a horse." Owen shook his head. "They're watching it, but I've got horses at the edge of town." He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "I'll help you get to Montrose." Kate narrowed her eyes. "Why would you help me?" "Let's just say Frank Hollister and I have unfinished business," Owen replied, his voice hardening. "But we need to move now." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. Whatever Owen's motivations, he represented her only chance of escape. They moved through town carefully, using back alleys and the cover of buildings. Owen seemed to know Delta's layout intimately for a stranger, guiding her with quiet confidence past danger. When they reached the eastern edge of town, two horses waited in a small copse of cottonwoods near the river. "Can you ride?" Owen asked as he checked the cinch on the larger mount, a muscular roan gelding. "Since I was 6, Kate replied, approaching the second horse, a dappled gray mare. "My father bred horses before." She trailed off, the familiar grief tightening her throat. Owen nodded, offering her a boost into the saddle. "We'll ride east along the river for a few miles, then cut north toward Grand Mesa. There's an old trapper's cabin where we can hide until dark." As they prepared to leave, Kate glanced back at Delta, the only home she'd ever known. "I never thought I'd be fleeing town like a criminal." "Sometimes running is the only way to survive long enough to fight back," Owen said, swinging effortlessly into his saddle. "But first, we need to get that ledger to someone who can use it." They rode hard for an hour, following the Uncompahgre River where its banks were hidden by cottonwoods and willows. Kate remained vigilant, constantly checking behind them, but saw no signs of pursuit. Still, tension kept her spine rigid and her hands tight around the reins. "How do you know this area so well?" she asked when they finally slowed to rest the horses. Owen took a long drink from his canteen before answering. "I grew up near here, left when I was 17 to fight in the war." Kate studied him with new interest. He couldn't be more than 30, which meant he'd fought in the latter years of the Civil War, likely as little more than a boy. That explained some of the hardness she saw in him, the careful way he surveyed their surroundings. "And after the war?" "Worked cattle drives in Texas, did some scouting for the Army." He shrugged. "Drifted mostly." There was more to his story, Kate was certain, but Owen clearly wasn't one to share his past easily. Before she could press further, he was back in the saddle, gesturing for her to do the same. "We should keep moving. The cabin's another hour north." The trapper's cabin was little more than a single room with a stone fireplace, nestled in a small clearing surrounded by aspen trees. Inside was sparse a rough-hewn table, a chair, and a narrow cot with a dusty blanket. "Not exactly the Grand Hotel," Owen said, clearing cobwebs from the window, "but it'll keep us hidden tonight." Kate sank onto the chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She hadn't slept properly since stealing the ledger 3 days ago, surviving on fear and determination. Now that they'd stopped running, fatigue hit her like a physical blow. "You should rest," Owen said, noticing her drooping shoulders. "I'll keep watch. I need to look through this first." Kate pulled the ledger from her blouse and laid it on the table. "I know what I saw, but I need to understand all of it before we take it to the marshal." Owen nodded, moving to the fireplace to build a small fire against the evening chill. Kate began carefully examining the ledger, page by page. Hollister had documented everything: bribes to officials, money extorted from local businesses, ownership shares taken by force. And on page 47, what she'd been looking for: entries regarding her father. "He framed him," Kate whispered, fingers tracing the damning words. "Made it look like my father embezzled from the bank when it was Hollister all along." "Hollister owns the bank?" Owen asked, coming to stand behind her. "And the saloon, the hotel, and half the businesses in Delta," Kate confirmed bitterly. "My father was the bank manager." He started asking questions about discrepancies in the accounts. 2 weeks later, he was arrested for stealing $5,000 that Hollister had actually taken. Owen's expression darkened. "When was this?" "Almost a year ago. Father died in prison 3 months later, pneumonia, they said." Kate closed the ledger, blinking back tears. But it was really a broken heart. He couldn't bear the shame of everyone believing he was a thief. A muscle worked in Owen's jaw. "How did you get the ledger?" "Hollister keeps it in his office above the saloon. I persuaded his clerk to let me in." Kate's cheeks colored slightly. "I may have implied I was interested in him." A brief smile tugged at Owen's mouth. "Brave and dangerous. It was worth the risk." Kate lifted her chin defiantly. "This book proves my father was innocent. It shows Hollister has been bleeding this town dry for years." Owen moved to the window, checking outside before responding. "Did you read all of it?" There was something in his tone that made Kate study him more carefully. "Most of it. Why? Did you see anything about the Sawtooth mine?" Kate frowned, flipping back through the ledger. "Here's several entries about silver deposits and ownership transfers." "Why?" Owen was quiet for a long moment. "The Sawtooth was my family's mine. My father found a rich silver vein in '65, right after I left for the war. By the time I came back in '67, Hollister had taken it. My father was dead mining accident, supposedly, and my mother and sister had moved away." Understanding dawned on Kate's face. "That's why you're here. You came back for revenge." "I came back for justice," Owen corrected, his voice hard. "Been tracking Hollister for 3 years, gathering evidence. Never expected to find it all in one neat book." He nodded toward the ledger. "Or to find someone else with as much reason to hate him as I have." The revelation created a new connection between them, a shared enemy, a shared purpose. Kate felt a strange comfort in knowing she wasn't alone in her fight against Hollister. "We should reach Montrose by tomorrow afternoon if we leave before dawn," Owen said, returning to practical matters. "Get some rest. I'll take first watch." Kate wanted to argue to insist she could keep watch too, but exhaustion was making her eyelids heavy. She moved to the cot, wrapping herself in her shawl against the night chill. "Owen," she said softly as he settled by the window, rifle across his knees, "thank you for helping me." He nodded once, his profile outlined against the fading light. "Sleep, Katherine. We've got a long ride ahead." Kate closed her eyes, thinking it strange that her name on his lips sounded different, somehow like it belonged there. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what waited in Montrose, she fell into the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks, comforted by the steady presence of the man keeping watch in the darkness. She woke to Owen's hand on her shoulder and the gray light of pre-dawn filtering through the cabin's small window. "Time to go," he said quietly. "I heard riders passing about an hour ago. Could be nothing, but we shouldn't linger." Kate was instantly alert, gathering her few belongings while Owen saddled the horses. They ate a cold breakfast of jerky and hardtack, then set out as the first rays of sunlight touched the tops of the aspen trees. The path to Montrose took them through increasingly rugged terrain, over ridges, across shallow creeks, and through stands of pine and spruce. Owen set a brisk pace, but was careful not to push the horses too hard on the difficult ground. "How well do you know the marshal in Montrose?" Owen asked as they stopped to water the horses at a small stream. "Marshal Donovan." "Not well," Kate admitted, "but he has a reputation for honesty. Father always spoke highly of him." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "Let's hope that reputation is deserved. Hollister's influence reaches beyond Delta." "You think the marshal might be corrupted too?" "I think $5,000 can tempt a lot of men," Owen replied. "And that's just what we know Hollister stole from your father. The ledger shows he's taken much more." The implication was clear. They couldn't trust anyone completely, not even the law. Kate's heart sank at the thought that even with evidence, justice might still elude them. "What will you do?" she asked. "After we deliver the ledger?" Owen was silent for a long moment, watching the water ripple around the horse's legs. Haven't thought that far ahead. Been focused on Hollister for so long, I'm not sure what comes after." There was a loneliness in his admission that resonated with Kate. Her life, too, had been consumed by a single purpose: clearing her father's name. Beyond that, the future was a blank canvas. "Maybe you could reclaim your family's mine," she suggested. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Maybe. What about you? Will you go back to teaching if your father's name is cleared?" Kate considered the question as they remounted and continued riding. "I don't know. Delta holds too many painful memories now." She paused. "I've always wanted to see San Francisco." "Never been," Owen said. "Heard it's growing fast, though. Opportunities for a smart woman like you." The casual compliment brought warmth to Kate's cheeks. Despite the circumstances, she found herself increasingly drawn to this quiet, determined man. There was an integrity to him that had become rare in her experience, a straightforward honesty that contrasted sharply with the deceit she'd encountered in Delta. They rode in comfortable silence for several miles, the sun climbing higher in the clear blue sky. The spring day was beautiful, the landscape awash in greens and golds, wildflowers dotting the meadows they passed. Had the circumstances been different, it might have been a pleasant journey. Around midday, they crested a hill and caught their first glimpse of Montrose, in the distance a growing settlement in the valley below. Smoke rising from chimneys, the glint of metal roofs catching the sunlight. "We should reach town in a couple of hours," Owen said, squinting against the brightness. Kate nodded, relief flooding through her. They were going to make it. The ledger would soon be in the marshal's hands and her father's name would be cleared. Justice was within reach. Then Owen stiffened, his gaze fixed on something behind them. Riders, coming fast. Kate turned in her saddle, her heart sinking at the sight of dust clouds rising from the trail they'd just traveled. Hollister's men, probably. Owen's expression hardened as he calculated distances and options. 4, maybe 5 riders. They'll catch us before we reach Montrose if we stay on this trail. What do we do? Owen pointed to a line of trees to the west. There's a ravine through there, rough going, but it might slow them down. Come on. They urged their horses to a gallop, making for the tree line. Behind them, the distant riders had spotted them, shouts carried on the wind, followed by the faint crack of a rifle shot that fell far short. The ravine was steeper than it had appeared from a distance, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses down a treacherous slope of loose rock and exposed roots. Kate stumbled once, catching herself against a pine trunk, her palms scraping on rough bark. "You all right?" Owen asked, reaching for her arm to steady her. "Yes," Kate said, brushing dirt from her skirt. "Keep going." At the bottom of the ravine, a shallow stream gurgled over smooth stones. Owen helped Kate remount, then swung into his own saddle. "Follow the stream," he instructed. "It'll slow our tracks." They splashed downstream for nearly half a mile before the ravine widened and the stream bent eastward toward Montrose. As they emerged from the trees, Kate glanced back anxiously. Did we lose them? Owen studied the ridge they'd descended. "For now. But they'll figure out where we went soon enough. We need to push hard for Montrose." They rode at a punishing pace for the next hour, the horses lathered with sweat, their breathing labored. Kate's body ached from the long ride, but determination kept her upright in the saddle. The ledger pressed against her ribs, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Montrose grew closer, buildings taking shape, the steeple of a small church visible above the rooftops. They were less than a mile out when Owen suddenly reined his horse to a halt, staring at the road ahead. "Trouble," he said grimly. Kate followed his gaze and saw 3 riders positioned across the road, blocking their path into town. Even from this distance, she recognized Hollister's foreman, Silas Beck, his distinctive red beard catching the sunlight. They got ahead of us, she whispered, panic rising in her throat. How? Telegraph, Owen said tersely. Hollister must have men in Montrose too. Kate's hope crumbled. They were so close to safety, to justice, yet it seemed impossible now. What do we do? Owen assessed their situation, eyes scanning the landscape. There, he said, pointing to a cluster of buildings a quarter-mile east of the main road. That's the Anderson Ranch. Old Jim Anderson was a friend of my father's. If he's still alive, he might help us. It was their only chance. They veered east, keeping a low ridge between themselves and the men on the road. Kate prayed they hadn't been spotted yet, though she knew it was only a matter of time. The Anderson Ranch consisted of a main house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. As they approached, an elderly man emerged from the barn, squinting at them suspiciously, a shotgun held loosely in his hands. "That's far enough," he called when they were within earshot. "State your business." Owen raised his hands to show he meant no harm. "Jim Anderson." "I'm Owen O'Malley, Michael O'Malley's boy. We need help." The old man's stance softened slightly, though he didn't lower the shotgun. "Michael's boy? Hell, I thought you were dead. Heard you never came back from the war." "I came back," Owen said. "Just not to Delta," he gestured to Kate. "This is Katherine O'Donnell. We're being pursued by Frank Hollister's men. They're blocking the road into town." Anderson's weathered face darkened at Hollister's name. "What you do to rile that snake?" Kate reached into her blouse and pulled out the ledger. "We have evidence of his crimes. Need to get it to Marshal Donovan." Anderson considered them for a long moment, then nodded once. "Bring your horses into the barn. Quick, before you're spotted." They dismounted and led their exhausted horses inside the spacious barn. The cool shadows were a relief after hours in the sun. Anderson closed the heavy doors behind them, then turned to face them. "Hollister's got his claws deep in this county," he said, leaning his shotgun against a stall. "Ruined a lot of good folks, your father included," he added to Owen. "Been waiting years for someone to bring him down." "You'll help us reach the marshal?" Kate asked hopefully. Anderson scratched his gray beard. "Marshal Donovan's an honest man, but getting to him won't be easy if Hollister's men are watching the roads." He thought for a moment. "There's a spring cattle drive heading into Montrose today. Couple hundred head coming in for the sale tomorrow. My boy Theo's with them. They should be arriving in town about now." Owen's expression brightened with understanding. "A cattle drive would create enough confusion for us to slip through unnoticed." "Exactly," Anderson agreed. "I'll ride out to meet them. Tell Theo to create a distraction near the south entrance to town. You two can use that to get to the marshal's office." It was a solid plan, perhaps their only chance. Kate felt hope rekindling. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson." The old rancher nodded gruffly. "Rest your horses. Get some food in yourselves. Sarah, my wife, is up at the house. Tell her I sent you." He moved toward a stall where a saddled horse waited. "I'll be back within the hour. If I'm not, well, you'll know something went wrong." After Anderson departed, Owen and Kate led their horses to water troughs and began rubbing them down with handfuls of straw. The physical task helped calm Kate's nerves, the familiar motions reminding her of happier days helping her father with his horses. "Your father would be proud of you," Owen said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Taking on Hollister like this, it took courage." Kate smiled faintly. "He always said courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about doing what's right even when you're terrified." She paused, hands stilling on the mare's coat. "I am terrified, Owen. What if we can't get through to the marshal? What if Hollister's influence is too strong?" Owen moved to stand before her, his blue eyes steady on hers. "Then we keep fighting, find another way." He hesitated, then reached out to tuck a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "You're not alone in this anymore, Katherine." The tenderness of the gesture, the warmth in his voice, sent a flutter through Kate's chest that had nothing to do with fear. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her, almost hoped he would. Instead, he stepped back, returning to his horse with a quietness that left her wondering if she'd imagined the connection between them. After tending to the horses, they made their way to the main house where Sarah Anderson, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, welcomed them warmly. She served them a hearty meal of beans, cornbread, and strong coffee, asking few questions but offering genuine sympathy when Kate explained their situation. "Jim's been waiting for Hollister to get his comeuppance for years," Sarah said, pouring more coffee. "That man's brought nothing but misery to this valley." They were finishing their meal when Jim Anderson returned, his expression grim but determined. "Theo will help," he confirmed. "The cattle will be driven through the south end of town in about an hour. There's only one problem: Hollister himself has arrived in Montrose." Kate's hand tightened around her coffee cup. "Hollister's here," Anderson nodded. "Rode in with a dozen men from what Theo said. They're watching the marshal's office." Owen exchanged a troubled look with Kate. Hollister's presence complicated matters significantly. The businessman rarely left Delta. For him to come personally meant he understood how damaging the ledger could be. "Does the marshal know what's happening?" Owen asked. "Theo couldn't get to him without being seen," Anderson replied. "But there's another way into the marshal's office through McGinty's barber shop next door. There's a connecting door that was put in years ago when the buildings were a single business." Owen considered this information. "Can your son create enough of a distraction for us to reach the barber shop unnoticed?" "Theo's driving those cattle right down Main Street," Anderson said with a hint of mischief in his aged eyes. "Trust me, every man in Montrose will be focused on that, including Hollister's bunch." The plan was set. Owen and Kate would ride with Anderson to the edge of town, then make their way to McGinty's barber shop during the confusion of the cattle drive. From there, they could reach Marshal Donovan undetected if all went well. As they prepared to leave, Kate changed into clothes Sarah offered: a simple brown skirt and white blouse that would attract less attention than her dirty blue dress. She also pinned her hair up neatly under a modest bonnet, transforming her appearance from fugitive to respectable young woman. When she emerged from the bedroom, Owen was waiting in the hall. His eyes widened slightly at the transformation, a reaction that brought unexpected warmth to Kate's cheeks. "You look," he started, then seemed to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. "Ready to go?" Kate nodded, patting the spot where the ledger was now hidden in a pocket Sarah had sewn into the skirt. "Ready." They rode with Anderson toward Montrose as the afternoon sun began its westward descent. On the outskirts of town, they dismounted and continued on foot, keeping to side streets and alleys. The sounds of an approaching cattle drive reached them: lowing cattle, shouting drovers, the thunder of hundreds of hooves. "Remember," Anderson said quietly as they paused behind the livery stable, "McGinty's is 3 doors down from the corner. Once the cattle start passing, move quickly. I'll create an additional distraction near the saloon to draw attention away from you." Owen gripped the old man's shoulder. "Thank you, Jim. I won't forget this." Anderson shrugged off the thanks. "Your father would have done the same for my boy. Just make sure Hollister pays for what he's done." With a final nod, Anderson moved away, leaving Owen and Kate alone in the shadows. The cattle were closer now, the first riders appearing at the far end of Main Street. "Stay close to me," Owen said, his voice low and steady. "If anything goes wrong, run for the marshal's office. Don't wait for me." Kate shook her head firmly. "We do this together or not at all." A half-smile touched Owen's lips. "Stubborn woman. You have no idea," Kate replied, her own smile brief but genuine. The first of the cattle reached Main Street and chaos erupted. The animals filled the wide dirt road from side to side, cowboys shouting and waving their hats to keep the herd moving. Townspeople scattered, some ducking into stores, others climbing onto porches to watch the spectacle. "Now," Owen said, taking Kate's hand. They moved swiftly along the edge of the buildings, staying in the shadows. Kate's heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it despite the commotion. They reached the corner and peered around cautiously. Main Street was a sea of dust and cattle. Through the chaos, Kate spotted Hollister and several of his men standing on the boardwalk in front of the hotel. Their attention was fixed on the cattle drive and on a sudden commotion near the saloon, where Jim Anderson appeared to be engaged in a heated argument with another man. "There's Maginty's," Owen said, nodding toward a storefront with a striped barber pole. "Ready?" Kate squeezed his hand. "Ready." They stepped onto the boardwalk and walked briskly toward the barber shop, trying to look like ordinary citizens avoiding the cattle. Kate kept her head down, the bonnet shading her face. 20 feet, 15 feet, 10. "O'Malley!" The shout cut through the noise of the cattle drive. Kate's blood ran cold as she turned to see Hollister pointing directly at them, his face contorted with rage. "Run!" Owen pushed Kate toward the barbershop door. They burst inside, startling the barber and his single customer. Owen slammed the door behind them, throwing the bolt. "Where's the door to the marshal's office?" he demanded. The barber, a balding man with a magnificent mustache, gaped at them. "Back wall behind the screen." But Owen was already pulling Kate toward the screen. Behind it, a narrow door led to a short hallway connecting to the marshal's office. They could hear shouting from the street, the heavy thud of boots on the boardwalk. "They're coming," Kate gasped, clutching the ledger through her skirt. They rushed through the hallway and into the marshal's office. A tall, broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair stood from behind a desk, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol on his hip. "Marshal Donovan," Kate said breathlessly. "I'm Katherine O'Donnell, Patrick O'Donnell's daughter. We have evidence against Frank Hollister." Confusion crossed the marshal's weathered face. "Evidence? What are you?" The door behind them crashed open as the barber stumbled through, followed by two of Hollister's men with guns drawn. Owen stepped in front of Kate, his own revolver appearing in his hand. "Drop it, O'Malley," one of the men snarled, "or the girl dies first. That's enough." Marshal Donovan's voice cracked like a whip. He had his own gun out now, aimed at Hollister's men. "Lower those weapons in my office, or I'll drop you where you stand." A tense standoff ensued, broken only when the front door of the marshal's office burst open. Frank Hollister himself strode in, followed by 3 more armed men. In his 50s, with steel-gray hair and cold eyes, Hollister carried himself with the arrogance of a man accustomed to power. "Marshal," he said smoothly, "these two are thieves. The woman stole valuable documents from my office in Delta. I've come to retrieve my property and see justice done." "Is that so?" Donovan's gaze shifted between Hollister and Kate, who was clutching a leather-bound book to her chest. "That true, Miss O'Donnell?" "You stealing from Mr. Hollister here?" Kate lifted her chin defiantly. "This ledger contains proof that Hollister framed my father for embezzlement. It documents years of his crimes: extortion, theft, even murder." "Preposterous," Hollister scoffed, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "The girl's delusional, Marshal. Her father was a thief who got what he deserved." "My father was innocent." Kate's voice trembled with emotion. "This proves it." She held out the ledger. "Page 47 shows how Hollister stole the money and framed my father." Pages 60 through 73 detail how he forced the O'Malley family off their silver mine after arranging Michael O'Malley's accident. Hollister's face darkened dangerously. "Give me that book, girl, or I swear you'll what?" Owen stepped forward, his gun still trained on Hollister's men. "Kill her like you killed my father. Add another murder to your list." The tension in the room was palpable. Outside, the cattle drive continued, dust filtering through the windows, the sound of lowing cattle and shouting cowboys creating a strange backdrop to the confrontation. Marshal Donovan's gaze hardened as he looked at Hollister. "I've had suspicions about you for years, Frank. Never had proof, though." "This is absurd," Hollister blustered. "You're going to take the word of a schoolteacher and a drifter over a respected businessman." "I'll take the evidence," Donovan replied evenly, holding out his hand to Kate. "Miss O'Donnell, may I see that ledger?" Kate stepped forward to hand him the book, but one of Hollister's men lunged suddenly, grabbing her arm. Owen reacted instantly, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, sending him sprawling. Chaos erupted. Guns were raised, threats shouted. Donovan bellowed for order, but Hollister seized the moment to grab Kate, pulling her against him with a revolver pressed to her temple. "Enough," he roared. "Drop your weapons or she dies." The room went silent. Kate stood rigid in Hollister's grip, the cold barrel of the gun against her skin. Her eyes found Owen's, seeing the anguish and rage there. "Let her go, Hollister," Owen said, his voice deathly quiet. "This ends now." Hollister laughed harshly. "Oh, it ends all right, but on my terms." He backed toward the door, dragging Kate with him. "Here's what's going to happen. Miss O'Donnell is coming with me. The rest of you will stay put until we're clear of town." "And then what?" Marshal Donovan demanded, his gun still aimed at Hollister. "You kill her once you're away. I can't allow that, Frank." "She'll be perfectly safe," Hollister said with a cold smile. "In fact, I have special plans for Miss O'Donnell. The Golden Nugget in Denver is always looking for new talent. I think our lovely schoolteacher might have a future on the stage." Kate's blood ran cold at his words. The Golden Nugget was a notorious saloon and brothel. Hollister wasn't planning to kill her, he was planning something far worse. "You'd sell her." Owen's voice was barely controlled fury. "After everything you've done, you'd add that to your crimes." "Business is business," Hollister replied callously. "She cost me a lot of trouble. She'll pay it back one way or another." The realization of what awaited her sent terror coursing through Kate, but also a fierce determination. She would not be a victim, not again. With a sudden movement, she stomped hard on Hollister's foot and drove her elbow into his ribs. Hollister grunted in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Kate to twist away. She lunged for the ledger on Donovan's desk as gunfire erupted around her. Someone grabbed her arm, pulling her down behind the desk as bullets splintered wood and shattered glass. When the shooting stopped, Kate raised her head cautiously. Owen was beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Across the room, two of Hollister's men lay motionless on the floor. Another clutched a bleeding arm. Marshal Donovan stood with his smoking revolver still raised, Deputy Wilson beside him. And Frank Hollister was attempting to flee through the front door. "Stop him!" Kate cried, clutching the ledger. Owen was on his feet in an instant, charging after Hollister. He caught the older man on the boardwalk outside, tackling him to the ground in full view of the townsfolk, who had gathered to watch the commotion. By the time Kate reached the doorway, Owen had Hollister pinned, his face a mask of controlled rage as he pressed the businessman's face into the dirt of the street. "For my father," he said quietly, though Kate was close enough to hear. "And for everyone else you've destroyed." Marshal Donovan stepped forward, handcuffs ready. "Frank Hollister, You're under arrest for attempted murder, extortion, fraud, and whatever else I find in this ledger." He nodded to the book in Kate's hands. "You'll be facing a federal judge for this one." As Hollister was hauled to his feet, his cold eyes found Kate's. "This isn't over, girl," he spat. "You'll regret crossing me." "No, Mr. Hollister," Kate replied steadily. "It is over, and the only regret is that it didn't happen sooner." The following hours passed in a blur of statements and telegrams. Marshal Donovan sent wires to the federal authorities in Denver and to the sheriff in Delta. Hollister and his men were locked in cells. The ledger was examined in detail, and Kate found herself recounting her father's story multiple times. Through it all, Owen remained by her side, a steady, reassuring presence. As evening fell, they sat together on a bench outside the marshal's office, watching as the town of Montrose settled back into its normal rhythm after the excitement of the day. "It's really over," Kate said softly, the enormity of it finally sinking in. "Father's name will be cleared." Owen nodded, his eyes on the darkening sky. "Hollister will face justice for both our fathers." "What will you do now?" Kate asked, the question that had been on her mind all day. Owen was silent for a long moment. "Reclaim the sawtooth, maybe. It's rightfully mine." He glanced at her. "What about you? Still thinking of San Francisco?" Kate considered the question. The future that had seemed so uncertain that morning now stretched before her with possibilities. "Perhaps. Or I might stay and teach here in Montrose. Delta holds too many painful memories now." "Miss O'Donnell." Marshal Donovan called from the doorway. "Telegram for you." The message was from Sarah Anderson, offering Kate a place to stay until she decided on her future plans. It was a generous offer, and Kate accepted gratefully, relieved to have somewhere to go that night. As they rode back to the Anderson ranch in the gathering dusk, Kate found herself studying Owen's profile against the purple-tinged sky. In just 2 days, this man had gone from stranger to savior to what? Friend, certainly. But there was something more, a connection, an understanding that went deeper than their shared quest for justice. The Andersons welcomed them warmly, offering a hearty supper and comfortable beds. After the meal, Kate found herself sitting on the porch with Owen, the night air cool and fresh after the heat of the day. "I never properly thanked you," she said, breaking the companionable silence, "for helping me. You risked your life for a stranger." Owen smiled faintly. "You weren't a stranger for long." The warmth in his voice made Kate's heart beat faster. "Will you stay in Montrose?" she asked. "After you reclaim the sawtooth?" "Hadn't thought that far ahead," Owen admitted. "Been chasing Hollister for so long, it's hard to imagine life without that purpose." "I understand," Kate said quietly. "Clearing Father's name has been my only goal for months, now that it's happening." She trailed off, gazing at the stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. "Now you need a new purpose," Owen finished for her. "Yes." Owen shifted slightly, his arm brushing against hers on the porch rail. Maybe we could find that purpose together." Kate turned to look at him, pulse quickening at what she saw in his blue eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've never met a woman like you, Katherine O'Donnell." Owen's voice was low, earnest. "Brave enough to steal from Frank Hollister. Determined enough to clear your father's name at any cost. I admire that. I admire you." Heat rushed to Kate's cheeks. "Owen, whatever she might have said was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Jim Anderson emerged from the house, shotgun in hand, as 3 riders came into view in the yard. "It's all right," called a familiar voice. "Marshal Donovan here." Tension eased as the marshal and 2 deputies dismounted. Donovan approached the porch, hat in hand. "Miss O'Donnell, Mr. O'Malley," he greeted them. "Sorry to disturb you so late, but there's been a development." Kate tensed. "Has Hollister escaped?" "No, nothing like that," Donovan assured her quickly, "but we've received word from Delta." It seems once news spread about Hollister's arrest, folks started talking. "A witness has come forward about your father's case," Miss O'Donnell, Hollister's former clerk, Jacob Peterson, says he was forced to falsify records against your father and has been carrying the guilt ever since. Hope blossomed in Kate's chest. "He'll testify," Donovan nodded. "Already has in a sworn statement to the sheriff. Between that, the ledger, and similar statements coming in about other cases, Hollister won't see the outside of a prison for the rest of his life." It was more than Kate had dared hope for, not just evidence, but testimony that would ensure justice was done. Tears of relief stung her eyes. "There's more," Donovan continued. "The territorial judge has authorized me to seize Hollister's assets pending trial. That includes the bank in Delta, which means your father's position there, and the family home can be restored to you, Miss O'Donnell, as rightful compensation." Kate was overwhelmed. Her father's home, his position at the bank, everything Hollister had taken could be hers again. It was justice beyond what she'd imagined possible. "That's wonderful news, Marshal," Owen said, seeing that Kate was too emotional to speak. "Thank you for bringing it personally." Donovan smiled. "Least I could do. You two took a big risk bringing that ledger to me. A lot of folks will sleep easier knowing Hollister's reign is over." He replaced his hat. "I'll leave you to celebrate the news. Good night." After the marshal departed, Kate remained on the porch trying to process all that had happened. Her father's name would be cleared completely. She could return to Delta if she wished, reclaim her childhood home, perhaps even resume teaching. Yet the thought of returning to Delta alone held little appeal. "You're quiet," Owen observed, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking about what happens next," Kate admitted. "I could go back to Delta now." Owen nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "Is that what you want?" Kate turned to face him fully. "What I want is to stop running from the past, to build something new." She took a deep breath. "When you mentioned finding a purpose together, what did you have in mind?" A slow smile spread across Owen's face. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "The Sawtooth Mine is a two-person operation at minimum. I'd need a partner. Someone smart, brave, stubborn enough to stand by me through whatever comes." "Are you offering me a business proposition, Mr. O'Malley?" Kate asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I'm offering a beginning," Owen replied softly. "The business can wait. I'd like to court you properly, Katherine O'Donnell, if you'll allow it. Get to know you without Hollister's men chasing us across the countryside." Kate couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "I think I'd like that very much." Owen's hand came up to gently cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, Katherine? I've been wanting to since I pulled you into that alley in Delta." Instead of answering, Kate rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but deepened as Owen's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, Kate felt breathless, her heart racing with emotions she'd never experienced before. "I should warn you," she said softly. "I'm still planning to see San Francisco someday." Owen laughed, the sound warming her from within. "I hear the Sawtooth silver sells very well in San Francisco. We might need to make regular trips." Kate repeated, liking the sound of it. "I think I could get used to that word." 3 months later, Kate stood before the mirror in what had once been her childhood bedroom in Delta. The house felt both familiar and strange, a piece of her past reclaimed, yet different now that she alone occupied it. She smoothed the front of her new green dress, chosen specifically for tonight's celebration. Delta had changed dramatically in the months since Hollister's arrest. With his criminal empire dismantled, the town was experiencing a rebirth. New businesses opened. People spoke freely without fear. And tonight, the newly formed town council was holding a celebration to mark the community's fresh start. A knock at the front door pulled Kate from her reflection. She hurried downstairs, knowing exactly who awaited her. Owen stood on the porch, looking handsome in a new suit, his dark hair neatly trimmed. The sight of him still made her heart race, even after months of courtship. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. Kate smiled, accepting the bouquet of wildflowers he offered. "And you look very distinguished, Mr. O'Malley. Is that a new suit?" "Figured I should look the part of a successful mine owner," Owen replied with a grin. The Sawtooth was producing well under his management, the silver vein proving even richer than anticipated. As they walked arm in arm toward the town hall, Kate marveled at how much had changed. Delta was bustling with activity, new shops open, the saloon under new management, even a small theater being constructed at the end of Main Street. "Did I mention the theater company from Denver is looking for local talent?" Owen said casually as they passed the construction site. "They'll be performing here monthly once the building is complete." Kate laughed. "Are you suggesting I give up teaching for the stage?" "Just mentioning it," Owen replied with a smile. "You were magnificent standing up to Hollister that day. I thought you might have a flair for dramatics." "I think I've had quite enough drama to last a lifetime," Kate said, squeezing his arm affectionately. They reached the town hall, where dozens of Delta residents had gathered for the celebration. Kate was greeted warmly by former students and their parents, by shopkeepers who had once been too intimidated by Hollister to speak to her after her father's arrest. During a lull in the festivities, Owen led Kate out onto the small balcony overlooking the Main Street. The setting sun painted Delta in shades of gold and rose, the mountains beyond purple in the fading light. "It's beautiful," Kate said softly. "I never thought I'd see Delta this way again, free from Hollister's shadow." Owen nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished here. The school board practically begged you to return to teaching." "And I'm looking forward to it," Kate replied. She had agreed to resume her position at the schoolhouse, starting with the fall term, "though I'll miss the mine. I've grown quite fond of it." "About that." Owen turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I've been thinking. The Sawtooth is only a half-day's ride from here. No reason a man couldn't make that journey frequently if he had sufficient motivation." Kate raised an eyebrow. "What motivation did you have in mind?" Owen's blue eyes held her steadily. "The best motivation a man could have, coming home to his wife." Kate's breath caught as Owen lowered himself to one knee, still holding her hands. "Katherine O'Donnell, these past months have shown me what I want for the rest of my life, and that's you. Your courage, your determination, your heart. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Kate's vision as joy welled up within her. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen, I will." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. When they parted, Owen reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate silver ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Found it in a strong box my father kept hidden at the mine. Always meant for you, I think." The ring slid perfectly onto Kate's finger, catching the last rays of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," she said softly. From inside the town hall, music began to play, a lively fiddle tune that spilled out onto the balcony. "Dance with me, future Mrs. O'Malley?" Owen asked, offering his hand with a smile that made Kate fall in love all over again. "Always," she replied, stepping into his arms. As they danced beneath the emerging stars, Kate thought of the journey that had brought them here, from danger and desperation to this moment of perfect happiness. What had begun with a stolen ledger and a desperate flight had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand back to Kate's house, Owen mentioned casually, "I had an interesting visitor at the mine yesterday. A man from San Francisco, buyer for a large silver exchange there, wants to establish a regular contract with the Sawtooth." Kate looked up at him, catching the twinkle in his eye. "Is that so? And would this contract require the mine owner to travel to San Francisco occasionally?" "Oh, most definitely," Owen replied, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Probably need to bring his wife along too. Make a proper trip of it." "His wife would certainly insist on it," Kate said with a laugh. When they reached her porch, Owen pulled her close once more. "So when should we make this official? I was thinking spring. The wildflowers will be blooming by then." "Spring sounds perfect," Kate agreed. "A new beginning." "The first of many," Owen promised, sealing the words with a kiss. 1 year later, Kate stood at the window of their home near the Sawtooth mine, watching as Owen directed workers loading silver ore onto wagons bound for the smelter in Montrose. The mine was thriving under his management, employing 20 men from the surrounding area and producing some of the finest silver in Colorado. She rested her hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick beneath her palm. Their first child was due in less than a month, and Kate could hardly contain her excitement. The nursery was ready, painted a cheerful yellow, with a cradle Owen had crafted himself from aspen wood. Their life together had unfolded in ways Kate could never have imagined that day when she'd stolen Hollister's ledger. She divided her time between teaching in Delta 3 days a week and helping Owen manage the mine's accounts. They'd made 2 trips to San Francisco, where Kate had fallen in love with the bustling city by the bay. On their second visit, they'd purchased a small cottage near the ocean, planning to spend summers there once the baby was old enough to travel. Frank Hollister was serving a life sentence in the territorial prison, his empire dismantled, his ill-gotten gains restored to those he'd wronged. The Golden Nugget in Denver had been closed down, its owner prosecuted for trafficking young women. Justice had been served, allowing Kate and Owen to build their future without shadows from the past. The front door opened, and Owen entered, removing his hat and hanging it on the peg by the door. His face brightened at the sight of Kate, and he crossed the room to embrace her, his hand joining hers on her rounded belly. "How are my treasures today?" he asked, kissing her softly. "Active," Kate replied with a smile. "Your son has been kicking non-stop." "Daughter," Owen corrected with a wink. It was a gentle argument they'd been having for months, neither knowing the gender of their child but both enjoying the speculation. "Either way, this baby will be loved," Kate said softly. "Without question," Owen agreed. "Just like his or her mother." As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows of their home, Kate leaned against her husband's strength, grateful for the twisting path that had led her to this happiness. From a desperate woman clutching a stolen ledger to a beloved wife and soon-to-be mother, her journey had been unexpected but perfect. "I was thinking," Owen said, his arm still around her, "after the baby comes and you're ready, we might take that trip to San Francisco in the fall. Show our little one the ocean." Kate smiled up at him. "I'd like that, though I'm in no hurry to leave. Everything I need is right here." Owen's eyes, as blue and clear as the Colorado sky, held hers with the same intensity they had that first day in Delta when he'd pulled her into the alley to save her life. "I love you, Katherine O'Malley, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Kate replied, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "My protector, my partner, my home." Outside, the mountains stood sentinel as they had for millennia, witnessing the small, perfect moments that made up a life well lived. And inside the warm house built with silver from the Sawtooth mine, a love that had begun in danger and desperation continued to grow, stronger with each passing day, a testament to the courage of two hearts that had found each other against all odds in the wild, untamed beauty of the Colorado frontier.